to borrow back into circulation, therefore perpetually increases the sum of debt by so much as periodic interest on an ever greater sum of falsified debt. Thus the sum of artificial debt increases even at an inherently ever greater rate, until the terminal sum of debt, which not only exceeds the subject's remaining capacities to service it, but likewise exceeds any possible creditworthiness to borrow further, as remains necessary nonetheless to maintain a vital circulation. As this is the very intrinsic process which inevitably manifests in the present conditions, Mr. Norman, therefore you must be aware that you are participating in one of the greatest crimes against your fellow man in history. We presume indeed then that this is why you cited the bank's own hollow propaganda, via errant links no less, as answering questions which the bank, of course, would hardly be inclined to answer ever truly, because the very responsible process is the whole purpose of the purported bank. Having these arguments out in the open now, we can reduce our immediate questions to just two. 1. Do you claim still that the bank gives up lawful consideration commensurable to the usual debt claimed by banking systems in obfuscating our promissory obligations to each other? How does he answer that? So that we could believe that banking should be preserved. And our second question is, and if you dispute any of the above arguments, what conclusive arguments can you provide, respectful of our rights to issue promissory obligations free of your terminal exploitation? Free of your terminal exploitation. Yours sincerely, Mark Lee Giles. Well, I sent this letter to a draft of it to a few people, and immediately everyone suggested we, take out full page newspaper ads. Of course, I'm practically bankrupt myself, so I'm one of us. I don't have the money to do these things, and we have to unite, people. I'm sorry. We really have to unite. All we're doing is working against each other. You want to protest because your pocket fell off your jeans, and that's why the economy is failing. Have at it. But the only credible thing to do is to understand what we're faced with and how to deal with it. And that also means that we have to understand that the politicians and the bankers aren't going to respond to our appeals. Every politician in power, their major contributor is the financial system. I mean, there are a few exceptions, of course, but just look at Obama. Representative of the people, my butt. He returned a proposition of mathematically perfected economy, and when I say that, I mean a proof that we have to adopt it. Returned it without even opening it. Why? Because they know me and they know that my arguments are the correct arguments. So if I have time here, I'd like to cover one other thing, and that's this further division between ourselves. So the next thing I want to talk about here is an example of the division. We have these arguments of inevitable terminal failure, and they point to some problems and issues, but there are others. There are many others. There are many others which, I'm sorry, but I do not complicate the issue in accounting for them. Is money evil, for instance? Inherently. Absolutely not. Especially if we're interested in fair trade, it's indispensable. Is fairness important? Well, I'll explain this principle here, but I'm asked to join this forum, which is about a demonstration, a world freedom demo, supposedly. The author founder of this Facebook group of, some 500 people. He was dug up from, by, my friends, Mark Giles and Jacob Schott, who have never even met personally, but, they lined this guy up, so that we could unite. And I spent a great deal of time trying to explain mathematically perfected economy to him. Actually, I shouldn't say trying to explain. It was explained perfectly well, but he just didn't get it. But what are we doing, standing up and even claiming that the banks are our greatest enemies, not understanding even how, much less how we resolve the crimes that they're imposing upon us? What happens? Well, what this is a story of is how and there are just so many of these events. We have one after another, doing the same things even, claiming that they're, stepping out of the system and, for a while. And I mean, I've talked on radio shows about this, other radio stations, which are actually even dedicated to this purpose. And I'm not saying, let's just forget about that purpose. I'm saying this. There are far stronger things to protest for in far more effective ways. The only effective way to accomplish what we need to accomplish is not this. Now, I'm not saying not to demonstrate. I'm saying to put our cards on the table, not to walk around like we're a non-cohesive, minority who just wants to cry out about capitalism because we're the underlings who've, first been dispossessed. That's an obvious cause, but nobody has any sympathy for you if you don't even know what to do. It's like when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, of course there were models for the document, and he had a gifted pen. And it enumerates the crimes against the colonists and declares the cause of irreversible separation. Now, in that, the document is, it's one of the most beautiful expressions of all time, and I don't deny any other country, its heroes who have advocated human rights so effectively as did Thomas Jefferson, who's among our founders. Perhaps we shouldn't have favorites, but I have a great favoritism for Jefferson. Immense respect for his work. But if instead each of us had said, oh, we have an internet, I'm going to start my own revolution, and it's going to have a donation button on it. And I'm going to claim that money has to be spent into circulation, even though this fella, Mike Montagne, whose work I read, he says you can't do that. I just read this story about Benjamin Franklin, and that's exactly what Franklin advocated. And of course, what Franklin advocated is in my story of Parable of Perfect Economy, which in fact, the words that are spoken through the mouth of Benjamin Franklin are the words of Mike Montagne spoken through the fictional mouth of Benjamin Franklin. So this person goes off and he advocates spending money into circulation, that money has to be a gift, on and on and on and on. Ellen Hodgson Brown used to claim that, this colonial script, this Pennsylvania currency, was the most brilliant banking model in our nation's history, until I myself informed her on op-ed news forums that, those were the words of Mike Montagne issued through the fictional mouth of Benjamin Franklin. I tried to hold her accountable for explaining how the Land Bank of Pennsylvania could possibly, provide those principles or serve us even in any really truly soluble way. By soluble, I mean, we only have a few problems here: inflation, deflation, maldisposition. systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, and inherent irreversible multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest, all of which are solved simply by eradicating interest and an obligatory schedule of payment. But there's no such thing as like a let system like we discussed last week, actually saving us from these problems. We're not off to the side. The debts of the country are still, the private people and the public government, they're still escalating likewise. It doesn't change a thing, And so, as I explained last week, these are things I wouldn't even dream of advocating to the people, because the only thing that's going to save us is mathematically perfected economy across the whole system. And it's our right to demand that. But so what goes on here it chronicles destruction of this object by a guy who couldn't even understand mathematically perfected economy, and suddenly, he's advocating a resource-based system. Even after I explain again, I spent hours at this yesterday. Even after I explain again that there's actually even no such thing as a resource-based system which could reward people for production. That's a very, 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 very important limitation. Now, any, I believe, intelligent person who crosses on every page of my website, there's a definition of mathematically perfected economy, which declares it to be, a singular solution. So why do these things come up like this? I mean, we have constant, I defeat all these propositions, and they just come right back again because some dreamy person just thinks that, we could do this, that would work. What we really need is a complete social revolution, and, we need to think about everything differently. Well, indeed we may, but that doesn't prescribe what's economy, Explicitly, what prescribes economy is what prescribes economy, and I've gone over this and over this and over this, not only with this person who continually raises this, but, who else as well? I mean, there's people like, Vincent here of TNS, he called me. He says, it sounds like this guy might be the originator of this whole idea. He's got the only explanation for it. I'm going to call him and see what he's made of. And he did. We've become great friends. And we understand each other perfectly well. If I start something, Vincent knows where it's going. Truly knows where it's going. Not like the man I interviewed last week, just interrupted me. Then we have immense respect for each other because each of us know where each of us is going. Why? Because we understand this thing. Why do we understand it? Because it's elementary math. We didn't fight it. We took the time. Vincent studied my work. It may not be the best written work in the world, but it explains the problem, and it's the only explanation you can truly find. It's certainly the only original explanation. Somebody else may copy it, but it's just like that in that game we played in children. We all sat in a circle. First person whispers something in the person's ear next to them, and it goes around the circle. When it comes back to you, it's nothing like what it started out to be. So the first part of this discussion is, where to begin this march or demonstration that's to occur in the UK, evidently in London. All right, and Jake Chelonia advocates starting at the Bank of England and stopping at the Bank of England. The Bank of England is the mother of all our issues. All right, hooray, hooray, because then he says, don't get sidetracked. Focus on the Bank of England. Forget about politics and stuff. It's the central banks and their shareholders that are causing all our problems. Wars, starvation, recessions, insoluble debt, greed, fear, and whatnot. Focus. So this person that I've explained mathematically perfected economy to many times now, in writing, in person over Skype, responds, it's no doubt we need to get rid of the banking system, sucking the life out of the planet. Okay, so he's agreed with our causes, and I don't find fault with him. And I'm not trying to be personal here.